Time of the Titans is probably one of the most iconic episodes of Walking with Dinosaurs, and for good reason, as I consider it one of the best episodes of not only this series, but the entire Walking with trilogy. It once again takes place in North America, this time 152 million years ago in the late Jurassic, quite a time jump from New Blood. The tone of this episode is quite different from the last one too, as are all of the episodes, which is part of what makes each of the episodes and the series as a whole so memorable. This one has a marvelous and spectacular feel, very well showing how the dinosaurs thrived and diversified in the Jurassic, becoming some of the most magnificent animals ever to walk the earth. The filming location reflects this, and it's once again great, perfectly encapsulating its tone. Beautiful green plains and forests full of life. It begins with a female Diplodocus, one of the many sauropods of the Jurassic and the longest of them all, laying her eggs in the forest before joining the rest of her herd in the plains. While this may not sound that special, the way it is presented makes it feel epic, with Bartlett's score soaring, grandiose narration, and camera angles that make you feel the true weight of these animals. The rest of the episode focuses on a female Diplodocus sauropodlet and the rest of a crush of younglings that she hatched with as they grow. Immediately after hatching, they are stalked by the carnivorous Sauropod ornitholestes, a dinosaur related to those that evolved in the birds, but most manage to evade it. The crush explores into the deep forest and we learn about their unique way of feeding, and we also intercut with a large herd of adult Diplodocus in the plains to learn about their lifestyle, including their supposed oxpecker-like symbiotic relationship with small pterosaurs called the Norognathus. As the sauropods grow, they also encounter larger dinosaurs like Stegosaurus, the famous plated herbivore with its trademark deadly Thagomizer, and Allosaurus, a large theropod and the top predator of the late Jurassic. After 5 years, the sauropodlets have grown into juveniles that are starting to get too large for the forests. They are abruptly forced out by a huge fire, of which only 3 survive. While they search in the Jurassic plains for an adult herd, we get by far one of the best introductions of an animal in the entire Walking With trilogy.
This is Brachiosaurus, a 13-meter high sauropod that specializes in grazing on the treetops.
Eventually, an adult herd accepts the adolescents after only 2 of the original crush are left, and they join them. 5 years later, the Diplodocus that hatched 10 years ago are now old enough to mate, and we get to see the interesting mating ritual of Diplodocus with the main female and a male. A few days later, the main female is ambushed by an Allosaurus, only to be saved by a huge older female. The episode concludes with a sort of bittersweet ending. The same marvelous music from the beginning plays, and we get a gorgeous aerial shot of the entirety of the enormous herd, but it explains that sauropods go into decline after the Jurassic, and with their extinction at the end of the Cretaceous, life on land will never again get that large. This episode is simply breathtaking. There are plenty of standout, memorable scenes that leave a great impression and will give you goosebumps even 20 years after its debut, such as the intro and the canyon scene where the Allosaurus and Stegosaurus meet. It's thrilling and it is combined with a suspenseful, explosive soundtrack. Brachiosaurus' thunderous entrance as the music soars is also a quite unforgettable and even bone-chilling moment. You come to root for the Diplodocus crush quite easily as they go through many near-death experiences while they grow into an immense size. You get a real sense of what nature is actually like, amazing and beautiful, but also dangerous. This episode also probably has the least amount of scientific inaccuracies and still holds up pretty well today, especially when it comes to portraying the animals in the right time and place, but it's not without its flaws. The nasal crest on the Ornitholestes in the program is non-existent on the real animal, but it's excusable as it was thought to be something the real animal had at the time because of the holotype specimen having a broken nose. However, there is a legitimate error, and that's the fact that the model doesn't have feathers, which the real animal most certainly had and was already thought to have at the time. Most paleontologists had already accepted at this point that coelurosaurs like Ornitholestes and Dromaeosaurs most likely had feathers, so the fact that this was made in the 90s really isn't an excuse. And no, just putting a few quills on the top of the head isn't enough. I'm looking at you, Jurassic Park 3. To my understanding, the reason feathers weren't given to the animal was because it would have cost more and been more difficult to animate, and this no feathers rule unfortunately spans throughout the rest of the series, with the exception of birds, which probably only got them because it would be absolutely flat out ludicrous for them not to have feathers. Anorognathus' betrayal in the show is unfortunately pretty much entirely wrong. First, it lived in Germany, not North America. A better choice would have been the North American pterosaur Mesodactylus. It also most likely didn't have the lifestyle of a modern-day oxpecker as shown in the program, instead being micro-nightjar-like insectivores. And finally, the anatomy is inconsistent with the real animal, having a smaller head and wings and a longer neck. While Brachiosaurus was the largest land animal formerly described at the time, we now know the titanosaurs of the Cretaceous surpassed it, the largest either being Patagotitan or Argentinosaurus. Diplodocus's neck would have actually been more vertical, though this is due to more recent studies, so this really isn't an error on the producer's part. Finally, the sauropod decline described at the end of the episode isn't entirely accurate to our current knowledge, because again, sauropods actually did just fine during the Cretaceous and got even bigger, though it is acceptable for the time as most of the large titanosaurs from the Cretaceous weren't described yet. For the pros, except for the Anorognathus, the speculation and behavior for all the animals is rather reasonable and well done, such as the Diplodocus mating rituals. The Diplodocus and Stegosaurus models are great, with the former being really accurate for its time and the latter still holding up extremely well today, not really having any real problems. The Allosaurus model looks really good except for one minor problem with the head, the fact that the crests are a little inaccurate, but thankfully this was fixed in the special Ballad of Big Al. The Ornitholestes model also has a pretty accurate anatomy too, except for the aforementioned problems, and the ornithopods seen scattering around look just fine too. Once again, the color schemes look very appealing, the sound effects are extremely convincing, and the animation is stellar. Overall, this is another fantastic episode in the series, with all the things that make this series great perfectly implemented and being pretty scientifically accurate for its time. Though it still has some problems, pretty much every episode in the series does. It shows the glory of the late Jurassic really well, and is just a really spectacular and exciting episode. Definitely one of the finest of the Walking With trilogy.